Cool, thank you. So some of you maybe saw some variation of this. So sorry if you're hearing some of these things twice, but I'm glad to see a lot of new faces. And yeah, I'm glad to talk about this today because I think the discussion we had earlier really connects into the things we're working on. Our project is called DeSci Sense-Making Networks. I'm Ronen, Shahar, and Peppa are the team members. And yeah, it's about making sense of science. So yeah, you can feel free to. Yeah, so we talked earlier about how do we find real scientists and where do we engage with the whole scientific community out in the wild. And I think science social media is a really pivotal place for decentralized science because what we find there is scientists are already doing DeSci and in a lot of ways. If you can just, yeah, so this is a scientist I happen to follow, and it's funny because this tweet encapsulates so many things about, traditional science, DeSci, social media. He's saying, look at this paper is acknowledging him that he helped inspire the paper with his tweets, and kind of joking, Twitter isn't really science. Most scientists don't think that Twitter is real academic work. And then if you click again, he replies to it, and it's like, okay, yeah, they're right, but this is still fun. So this is a scientist that doesn't think that science social media is real academic work. But he's in fact inspired some scientists with his tweets to do real academic work. So yeah, this kind of encapsulates a few things. If you click on the, yeah, this is DeSci in practice. It's scientists exchanging scientific information in a very decentralized format. Anyone can participate in social media. You don't have to have credentials. You don't have to publish papers. You can inspire people's work just by tweeting. But the problem is it's locked into centralized platforms. So this isn't anything we can kind of record on a scientific record. It's on a centralized platform that could disappear tomorrow. And it's also locked out of traditional science. It's locked out of science because of these norms around what constitutes a real contribution in science. And people like the scientists, which I'm not shaming him. I think this is a lot of people just think this. They're kind of locking out new ways of contributing to science. And we think that these kind of ways of contributing to science are going to be really key in the new versions of science we're all trying to build. So we have this kind of dynamic where DeSci and open science are broadening access to science. They're making a lot of research available, but there's still this big question of how we're making sense of all the new research being created. And that's where our project is focused, and it ties into science and social media. Yeah. Right. So a lot of people, today are talking about AI and how, autonomous scientists and autonomous research, and that's great. But we also kind of just want to caution a little bit about over-automating sense making in science, because there's a point at which doing that is kind of like asking a robot to lift weights for you. You're kind of not doing the real thing, and you're just, if you outsource everything, you end up with nothing. And if you look at sort of the cognitive science literature about sense making, it's actually something that you kind of have to invest effort in. If you're not investing effort, you're probably not making sense of it, and you're asking a robot to lift weights for you. So there's always going to be a delicate trade-off between automating the right parts versus doing things ourselves. And to be more concrete about what we mean by sort of making sense of science, it ultimately comes down to researchers engaging with each other in discourse about scientific research. And our problem starts from the fact that the mounting scale of science has really broken the process of making sense of research, because the chances now are that most researchers haven't even read the same papers. There's such an astronomical scale of publishing versus the amount of papers that anyone can humanly read. And we have this dynamic where we're just not even in the same universes, where the disciplines are all fractured, and we just don't even know who the scientists next door, what they're actually even researching. Our sort of dream API for defragmenting science, and this is kind of just a joke because these are things that are really basic that we think would be helpful for scientists. Like, wouldn't it be nice if we could just look up a paper and look at all the discourse around that paper, get all the conversations anyone has ever had about that paper? Sure, we'd have to filter it, but just let's start with getting access to it, right? That's pretty simple. What are researchers saying about a piece of research? We don't have that today. Same thing for like, what is a researcher engaging with? Like, there's experts in certain fields, like what are they looking at? What papers are they reading? We don't know. So we have the same problems of like data that should be out there, but it isn't out there. And finally, we have from the researcher side, like if I want to publish something, like if I want to share some learning that I have about research, I don't really have a way to do it. I can do it on Twitter, right? But then I have to hope sort of that the virality gods will make my tweet go viral and that people will see it. And if I just kind of comment in some random note-taking app, no one is gonna find it. So we have problems with publishing our interactions in meaningful ways. So to summarize, our situation is that we have open science, we can access these preprints, we can read papers, but to make sense of the papers, we have this whole kind of, you could think of this as like the atom and the electrons around it. We need all this kind of surrounding information, all the ways people are making sense of the science to actually really understand how this research, its impact, its connections with other literature, et cetera, et cetera. And we have this, the problem with this is twofold. We have a lot of kinds of data. So we have things on Twitter, we have things on platforms like LinkedIn, we have reviews on blog posts, we have bookmarks and reference managers, we have annotations and annotation tools. So it's data that's very heterogeneous. So there's a bunch of different formats. It's a wild west. And it's also closed in many regards, because things like LinkedIn, you can't access the data without scraping, and it's expensive APIs. So we have both closed data and fragmented data. Yeah, that's what I said here. So siloed apps and bespoke formats. And sure, solving this is also pretty straightforward. We just want data that is not siloed, it's open and fair, and that it's not in bespoke formats. It's kind of semantic. We have good ways of representing heterogeneous data by using these principles from like 30 years ago of semantic web. How do you represent like knowledge graphs and things like that? And indeed, we already have part of the puzzle here, because we have systems that allow us to publish this kind of semantic data about scientific research. It's called nano-publishing, and this is a project that we heard about yesterday from some of the people that were behind the original project, and I'll show you some examples today. A nano-publication is basically a social media tweet, but with semantics. So they were already talking like 20 years ago, like, why don't we have a semantic Twitter? And we still don't have it, but we think that idea is not lost in its value. And just maybe one more, yeah, we'll just say about nano-publications are great, but the problem with them is that they are hard to create. No one wants to fill out these forms, and there's no apps that use them. So there's no way to find nano-publications. So there's no incentive to create them. Yeah, so we started by saying open, fair, semantic data is what we want, but it's not the only thing we want. We also want semantic social apps for scientists that have great UX that make it really easy to publish this kind of data. And this is our sort of next step. We see this as the sort of next iteration of semantic social networks for scientists. We call it sense-making networks. And basically what it is, social networks with nanopubs instead of posts. So it's revisiting the dream of semantic Twitter. We think it has a lot of importance in science, and it's an idea whose kind of time has come, and LLMs have made it a possibility now, because it can sidestep that whole problem of form filling and doing all the tedious things that no one wants to do. So we have open, fair data, and we also have AI publishing assistants that can help us create this data in the first place, and cool decentralized applications that are using the data in a variety of interesting ways. And we'll show you some examples, hopefully. So this is what we're working on currently. The first step to this is just giving scientists a way to stay on their social platforms. So we don't want we want to meet scientists where they're at, and this really touches the discussion we were having earlier. We don't want to sell them a world that they have to kind of leave everything they've known and kind of join the revolution. And we might get some people that way, but for a majority of the scientists, we kind of really have to meet them doing what they were doing, where their fan base is, or their audience, or their peers are. And to do that, we want to enable them to stay on those platforms, but also to additionally sort of join the new world, and the new world is semantic, self-sovereign data, using either Web3 native networks or networks like nano-publications, which are decentralized but not Web3. Yeah, I'll just show you a quick demo of our app. Some people, you have to click, I think, both the links. I hope this works. We have to log in. Maybe it won't work, actually. Okay, yeah, I forgot that part. Okay. There's like already an orchid. Yeah, sorry, never mind. We can do it later. The idea is that it's like a cross-poster app. You log in with Orchid, and you can simultaneously published out to your social networks, as well as to you have an AI in the background that's helping you create the semantics to publish out to the nano publication app. So yeah, you can move on. And the interesting thing about the nano publication network is that because it's semantic data, once things are out on that network, you have these APIs we were talking about earlier. Like if you want to look up a paper and see all the discourse around the paper, that's a simple query on the nanopub network. So instead of having what we have today, which is these social media feed counters, like how many mentions does a paper have on social media, which are really hard to navigate, the data isn't open, you don't know what that number means, we can have a new kind of feed, which is semantic powered. And you would be able to see, okay, how are people relating to this piece of research? What have been the discussions? Maybe you could filter it by certain networks so you wouldn't get spammed. But basically a lot richer experience in navigating this kind of information. This one you should be able to do, I think. Yeah, so this is just showing you this, like a Sparkle query that will, given some URL, you can just look up all the discussion around that paper. So it comes for free by just posting on the Nano Publication Network. So these are all kinds of different nano publications that people have created about this URL. The next step would be, embedding this in an app and not just in this kind of query endpoint. Cool. So people have kind of alluded to, Richard talked about this a little in his talk. The sort of classic thing that a lot of, GPT is working by scraping text data from all over the internet, and we can see that that's already pretty crazy and amazing. And the next frontier for this is, we think, combining with semantic data. And you can do, it just opens, it's just a combinatorial explosion in the things you can actually do once you have structured data as well. You have knowledge graphs combined with language models and other AI. And to give an example here, these queries would probably, people would probably think that they're kind of sci-fi maybe a few years ago, and today we can actually see that they're realizable with the existing technology or what will soon be existing technology. Show me recommended papers by researchers in my network. These are things you can't ask GPT for. Like it won't be able to answer you because it just doesn't have the access to semantic data. But it could answer them once it has access to the right data. Summarizing debates around papers, showing me the positions of different researchers, show me people in the conference who've read these papers, keep me notified on job offers. These are things that are like any scientist would want, right? It's not, you don't need to be like a DeSci revolutionary to want to have this access to this information and participate in this network. So we're really, we really believe in finding the real pain points that scientists have when they're trying to, deal with information overload and navigating the literature. This is just another query we can. So you get the point. It's if you want to query, let's say you meet someone at a conference. What papers do we have in common? Like, wouldn't that be fun to be able to do and have that kind of on your augmented reality instead of having to kind of fish for it in conversation and maybe not finding it. You just take two ORCIDs and find what their common denominator is. And it can get even crazier than this. This is, we're doing some experiments just with asking GPT to translate natural language queries to the Sparkle, which is the query language. And it can actually do this. It might take a few tries, but you can really just ask for what you want and you can get answers. This is kind of a demo. You can click on the, so, show me the recommended URLs, and we get something like this. This is we did a bit of, iterating on the prompt here, but just to show you, the kind of results. So, show me, these are URLs that people have recommended on the NanoPub network. So no need to know any kind of fancy query languages, just natural language, and you can get access to interesting data. And this is going back to the point we made earlier about science and social media. It really does change it changes science in a very deep way, because anyone can nanopublish. Any kind of nanopublication can be potentially impactful because it can be something as simple as I read this paper, and things that are more advanced, like making new insights based on reading some research. So it kind of allows for this spectrum of participation. Instead of the only token you have is you have to publish a full-length paper and get it accepted in some peer-reviewed journal. So it opens the floor for a lot of different kinds of people to participate, including citizen scientists and non-traditional scientists. Yeah, and it's also this new mode of science. I think we're often sort of stuck in the traditional science, publish or perish, competition. And I think the tools we're building here are coming from this place of cooperation, and we're all pretty mindful of the fact that we're not going to beat these huge publishers like Springer and Elsevier by trying each of us to build the next bigger Elsevier or Springer. It's going to come from this place of radical interoperation between different projects that provide new kinds of use cases that these platforms cannot provide. Yeah, so these are just some future directions we've been talking about also in the conference. The Nano Publications Network, it's interesting because it was built completely sort of independently of Web3 by a group of scientists that were sort of they wanted to just have this kind of tool, and they didn't know anything about tokens and crypto and all these things and decentralized storage, but they went and built a lot of the infrastructure themselves. So it could really benefit probably from some of the insights we're learning from these, all the accumulated knowledge from the Web3 ecosystem. And yeah, and then there's, of course, the sort of DeSci layer, infrastructure layer that we're building some of the projects in the ecosystem, like DeSci nodes and codecs that would be interesting to interface with. And yeah, this is our call for anyone who wants to be part of the project and help us out testing some of the things we're building and getting updated on our progress. We'd love to connect. So yeah, please just fill out that quick form and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
What is the inspiration of like how we have a data set and we've run sensitivity analysis with that?
I think this goes back to just the question of how the data is structured. So we're describing this very simple API where there's scientific research and there's conversation about the research. And we think all those things should be accessible, easily accessible, like the connections between the research and the conversation about the research. So as long as this doesn't have to live only on the Nano Publication Network, so it can live anywhere that sort of, if we can, just like scientific research lives across all kinds of different places, and then Google Scholar goes and indexes it all, the same sort of principle could work for this kind of data as well.
We bring our
Not just us. Yeah, you can bring your knowledge graph and we can publish it in a format that anyone can make sense of it or operate on it. Yeah, so definitely. I think being able to integrate with existing people's knowledge graph or existing communities' knowledge graphs and kind of getting them to sort of do the multiplayer thing will be amazing. And actually, Matt will be. I think Matt's coming up next, maybe on the discourse graphs, and so there's very cool, I think, directions in kind of getting these local knowledge graphs to start federating. Thank you.